how do you hold yourself all your innovations back and be like, okay, I'm going to experiment and see what comes out?
I have people that really hate my work, and I have people that really love my work, and that's fine. You have to know that you are the only one who can bring your particular thing into this world. And each one of us is unique and individual. You know, if two of us made artwork that looked the same, one of us would be really unnecessary. I love working, I love creating. It's really hard for me to do things that other people think is fun, like vacation. I don't want a vacation. I'd rather be working. Listen to your ideas. Listen to that little inner child or that inner voice and play. I mean, art is a form of play. And at some point, you're going to get tired with the same old toy.
Hey you, are you an emerging woman artist ready to take your work on a global stage? Want to get spotlight and resources to elevate your career to the next level? We've got just something for you. Introducing the Emerging Women Artist Award 2023 Fall Edition by Arts to Hearts Project. An extraordinary opportunity for women in the arts to showcase their brilliance and to be supported in their creative journey further. If you're creating painting, sculptures, mixed media, or new media, you're eligible to enter this award. If you have more questions about the eligibility for this award, make sure you send us an email at info@arts2heartsproject.com or simply DM submit on Arts to Hearts Project Instagram. So, prizes, oh my god, they're absolutely amazing. Let me get started. For a first prize winner, we have an absolutely amazing package that awaits you. From including a cash prize of $300 to a physical award that will be sent to you, to an exclusive series of mentorship calls with the industry experts like Asher Longshaw, Liz Legit, and many more. That is what if we are just getting started with. Not only that, the winner will also get an exclusive interview on this very podcast with me on the Arts to Hearts podcast and an opportunity to be published in the Studio Visit book, one of our favorite projects, and an exhibition opportunity of a virtual show with DXP Contemporary. The second and the third winners also will enjoy fantastic prizes, including exclusive interviews, mentorship opportunities, ATH directory listing, which all of in itself is over $2,000, $3,000. Plus, we are giving you so many more resources to get you started elevating your creative career so that you get the visibility you deserve. Don't miss this chance to have your art be recognized globally, to put yourself in a global art contemporary scene. The submissions close on 8th of November 2023, midnight EST. Apply now to the Emerging Artist Award 2023 Fall Edition, and we hope to see you thrive in your creative career like nobody else. Visit our website to learn more about the award and how you can be a part of this amazing opportunity. To also know more, you can simply DM submit to Arts to Hearts Project's Instagram, and we'll be there to host you.
Hello, Kerry. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you. This is so much fun. I'm good. How are you?
Very well. You know what? I want to start this podcast by saying I do love looking at you. But if anyone who's watching this right now on YouTube can see there's another guest on the back. And she looks gorgeous and spooky and all of it. And since it's a spooky season, both, tell me more about who she is.
That I forgot she was there. She's a giant paper doll that I made.
Oh my goodness. What is with you and dolls? Tell me.
People just started giving me dolls because they thought my paintings looked like dolls, even though they weren't supposed to.
What were they supposed to look like?
Just like people, just more realistic than dolls. But apparently, people just thought they looked like dolls. So people just started giving me dolls, thinking I was into dolls. So now I'm kind of into dolls. So I do find them interesting because they cross all cultures. Um, they're in every culture you can imagine. So they're symbolic and trusted little companions for people.
Amazing. But tell me something. Were you like, as a child, were you always like amazed by dolls? And it's also not dolls. I think your work has this like, and I think that was the first, I just told you, the first reason why I was so attracted to your work in the beginning was, I felt like we shared a lot of common materials, but also your work had a very different look. And I think what I really love about your work was how open and free and experimental you've been. And I've seen your journey in the sense of I've seen your work, and I've seen that, um, I've seen like, I feel like when I was looking at your Instagram and your work so far, I felt like I'd seen that you had these paintings and dolls and faces, and suddenly there was this burst of so many elements and hairs and dresses and fabrics and all of it coming and making another world. So I don't know if that observation is right or not, or if there are in between stages, but how and what has caused this transition and what brought you here?
I I actually think that's a really good question, and I think it has a interesting story. Um, these are ideas that I had had for probably 30 years. So I was making things, 30 years ago that were similar to this. Like, say I made a pillow, or just like a gift for my brother. That had painting on it, and I sewed things on it, and I had had these ideas for many years, and during COVID, I went back to school. So, which so I went back online to Savannah College of Art and Design.
So you were
Um,
learning arts.
yeah, I went back and got my master's. So that's where I had gotten my undergrad, and so then I went back during COVID and, worked on my master's, and that was really hard, much harder than I imagined. So during one of my assignments, I had to, one of the teachers asked me to, read a book or listen to something. So he suggested Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Yeah.
Um, I listened to his book, The Hero's Way. I
The
believe that's
hero's
the,
way.
yeah. And so my takeaway from that was follow your bliss. So I was like, bliss? What is bliss? I mean, we can have bliss. So, um, like that hadn't even crossed my mind. So I literally really that struck me, and I thought, what is my bliss? What does that look like? Um, so I made a list of things I love to do, and I made a list of things I dislike doing, and particularly in my work. And so I had kind of reached a point where I was no longer, I hated my process. The painting process was just, um, it was like pulling teeth after a while. I lost my love for it. When COVID hit, I lost my sense of humor. I just lost my passion. And so through this process of thinking about what my bliss was, I went back to these old ideas that I'd had 30 years ago. And I literally wrote things down like I love doing puzzles, like jigsaw puzzles. I love sorting things. When I was a kid, my grandmother would give me a big old tin can full of buttons, and she would just go sort them out by color, by size. Um, so I literally started writing down the things I enjoy doing, like those things.
But at that point, can you also tell us about what kind of work were you doing? I'm guessing you were painting, you were not adding as many elements on your work as you are today.
Right, I was just painting, but I was painting these objects, like toys and things, into my paintings. My paintings had those things in them.
You were painting monkeys, I've seen.
Sure, I paint whatever. I just love the portrait. So I kept the portrait. So I still love painting the portrait, so I kept that. Yeah.
Yes, further. Then what happened?
So then what happened is, I just started, why not just put these things in my painting? Why do I have to paint these things? There are no rules.
But you'd been painting for 30 years.
Yeah, yeah. So it was definitely out of my comfort zone, but I just found that the possibilities are endless. I didn't feel restricted anymore by the paint.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? In my own personal experience, I felt this. And I have a very similar story as yours in the sense of just not as long as that, in the sense I grew up in India and I spent a lot of time, with embroideries and materials, and we are extremely culturally, rich in the sense, in the sense of textiles. And I have always loved fabrics. I have embroideries have been my first love. Crafts is something that comes natural to me. And I always wanted to be a fashion designer because I spent a lot of time with my mom and we would go to thrift stores and bring materials. And I thought, okay, the most viable thing for me to do as a creative would be to be a fashion designer. And when I went down that path, I bought these, like, and I ran a business and I had these huge, embroidery boxes and like materials that I would collect. But I wasn't even like the fashion typical, typical fashion girl. And I realized it didn't, it just didn't fit in. And I wanted to be an artist. But when I set out to be an artist, when I entered into the arts, I was very full of ideas. I always felt like it was limitless. I felt like, oh, I could do this and I could do that, like a child, because I had no notions and no preset notions. And suddenly, then the whole game of fitting in started. When I knew, oh, this is crafts, this is art, this is commercial, this is fine art, this is personal, this is mixed media, this is painting. And in that process, I started defining myself so much. Oh, because I wanted to be validated so much that I, for a very long time, for a couple of years, in that sense, for someone who, like, I had these huge boxes with me always, but I never picked them up. And then one day, similarly to you, your COVID hit, and I was just drawing in my sketchbook, and I pulled out one box, and I just did it. And that brings me to my question: 30 years, if you had this, if you had this affinity towards these materials, do you think you have held yourself back all these years because of the notions that are set out? And did breaking that, how did that made you feel?
I would say yes, that in some ways, yes, perhaps I was being held back by myself. But however, I also feel like it takes that long to learn how to paint. So I feel like I learned how to paint and then I was ready to move on to something else. Yeah. So I don't know that it was so much being held back as it was more just an ambition to get my paint practice to a certain place. But once you reach that,
And I think a lot of artists do think like that way. And I think even I thought that way for a long time. I felt like, okay, I had to be like, for some reason, not for someone else, but for my own self, that I wanted to reach a point where I could paint at a certain way, in a certain way, at a certain level, and then give myself the permission to explore. But what's even strange is the embroidery part has always felt easier to me. Does that feel to you like that comes so naturally to me that sometimes I feel like, is this even enough? Am I doing even enough? Like,
yeah, I it's harder for me.
oh, really?
Yeah, I look at my embroidery and then I think, "Oh, this is so amateur," because I compare it to other like, I try so hard to be straight and I don't have tons of practice. I learned how to do embroidery when I was a child with my
Okay.
grandmother. Yeah,
Hmm.
so I don't know that much. I have to read books and look up how to make the stitches and so I'm pretty amateur at that, but I love doing it. And it's something I can do in the car when we're
Yeah.
driving to shows. So I
Yeah.
love it kills time and it's so enjoyable.
But tell me something. I really want to ask you this, and I request you to open your heart about this. How do you feel putting yourself, like, I think there's some kind of magic when, I hold myself still back when it comes to like experimenting with materials, in the sense of, am I being like, I can hear myself. Am I being too much? Is this too much? Is this, but I see, like, I really love that piece of yours that has like the doll and the hair coming out, and then these, like, there's so many things, and I love, because I'm a person who loves texture. But when I saw that piece, and I was like, wow, I need to find that courage to go all in. And I personally see in my own practice, I have this little, like, I'll make small movements, and I'll go out and more experimental and more. But I saw, when I saw that work of yours, I felt like, oh wow, how does it feel? Like, how do you push yourself? Like, how do you hold yourself, all your inhibitions back, and be like, okay, I'm going to experiment and see what comes out?
I would say that I definitely wasn't holding back, and I I did think, "This is nuts. I mean, this is too weird. This is too crazy." But at that point, I didn't really care. I wanted to see that happen, and, like, it brought me such joy to make that and 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 to do it. I was like, "I don't care if anyone ever sees this." It it people might like it, they might not, and, that's one great thing about art is, and for my 30 years experience, I have people that really hate my work, and I have people that really love my work, and that's fine. You just I don't know, you have to know that you are the only one who can bring your particular thing into this world. So, and each one of us is unique and individual. If two of us made artwork that looked the same, one of us would be really unnecessary.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. How about your familiarity with textures? I feel like the kind of work that you're making, um, it's also, does it come naturally for you to respond to different materials? Because there's so much like play in those pieces now. Or was this something that you've built intentionally and learned over the time?
I just started doing this, like maybe 3 years ago. And I would say it's very difficult because there's so many things at play. With paint, you're just kind of working with composition and color and your basics. But when you add shimmery objects or glittery objects or reflection, transparency, fabric, embroidery, like just putting all those things together has taken time and kind of like learned how to master one section of that and then keep adding and seeing like, because I still have to be happy with it and I still want it to be visually interesting and not they might be a little overwhelming for some people. But that's what I find interesting when you could see something different every time you look at it and from different angles. I
Angles. I
love
love that about it.
yeah, the angles of how the shadows are created and light reflection. Um, it moves like as you walk around one of these paintings, they kind of seem to move and have their own life. So I love that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let's talk a little bit about who you are. Like, did you always want to be an artist? Was that something that you'd always intended on?
I would say probably, it was definitely throughout my childhood and my high school, and, I was always the art kid. Um, I remember trying to draw when I was probably, like, 4 or 5 years old and trying to trace little Walt Disney characters on this light up drawing table and being so frustrated because I couldn't stay on the line. So I guess I've always had this sort of desire to create pictures.
How do you deal with the overwhelm that comes with, I think something that a lot of artists struggle with is their expectations of who they perceive themselves to be as an artist versus, a lot of times where we see ourselves. How do you stretch yourself creatively? How do you find that, how do you fill that gap? And like you said, you've taught yourself skills like that didn't come naturally to you and that are a big part of who you are today. How does that feel like to you?
Bliss. Like, it's my bliss. It's like I I love working, I love creating. It's really hard for me to, like, do things that, like, other people think is fun, like vacation. I don't want a vacation, I'd just rather be working. Um, it's I'm not sure, what am I answering the question?
What I'm interested, particularly if you ask, is I think, and this again comes back to the point that when you stretch yourself, like, you've evolved your work into, like, it's like from here to here, like you've really stretched yourself. And during that process, and I think I also experience this a lot of time, like when I look at someone's work and I'm like, wow, I'd really like to try something like that, or this is the kind of work I'd like to do. But at that point, probably I am not equipped technically, creatively, mindset wise, whatever, to reach that point. And it takes a lot of patience and practice to reach that point. Once you've said this, like, where your work looked at a certain way and now it looks entirely different, what is your suggestion and what is your own experience on how have you built these skill sets and transitioned creatively into one from one zone to this completely new zone of work?
Oh, well, baby steps can be the way. Um, just adding a new thing daily to your practice. An artist once told me, always be changing. And he said, always be changing, always add something a little different into each painting so you don't get like stuck or coined into a certain thing. And I always thought that was pretty good advice, that, you know, listen to your ideas, listen to that little inner child or that inner voice, and play. I mean, art is a form of play. And at some point you're going to get tired with the same old toy and you need to try new toys. So, and if you're having creative block, that's the perfect time to try something completely different. And don't show anyone.
Do you think this came out, your new, like, this body of work, this whole, did it come from a point where you're feeling stuck or like creatively blocked? It did. How can you talk a little bit more about it?
Oh, that was so painful. It was really painful. And I think that's one reason why I went back to school, is that I really didn't know what to do. I had no drive to make paintings anymore. I just was it felt labor intensive, and felt like pulling teeth, and I wasn't excited about anything I was doing. Um, I was I just couldn't come up with ideas. I didn't know what the background should look like. I don't know, it just was really tough. It was really tough times. So I thought, by going back to school, I thought, I can't even paint anymore. I literally thought I could never paint again. And I thought, I'm
Oh.
going to go to school and become a teacher.
Oh,
After going to school, I realized I didn't want to do that.
can you also share a little bit about, you know, I think one thing that a lot of artists are concerned with, and that is good and bad both can be. I think one end of the fear is if they change too much. A lot of artists are afraid that they no longer may feel relevant, people may not enjoy their work, or let's say if there's somebody who's already established, they feel like they may take away the success they've had so far. On the contrary, it could be completely a different scenario where what you have been trying to work on, maybe that would have been working, but something that you do completely, like, push yourself, it may work even better. Did you have these fears while your work was evolving? And how did that turn out for you?
Well, yes. And I really lost a ton of followers, and I lost a lot of collectors. But you know what? I couldn't stop making this work. And I still can't stop making this work. And I've even tried and thought, well, maybe I should go back to painting, because I've had better success. I mean, I'm doing okay with sales for these, but this is how I make my living. And so that is very scary when your income relies on your artwork. And it's a tough thing, but here's what I found is that guess what? So these people don't like this new work, but guess what? There's new people over here that like, so you either your collectors grow and go with you, or you find new ones. And that's worked extremely well. So I would say the big thing for me is that I cannot stop doing it. I just can't.
How about your advice for someone? Very tactical question, very a business side of questions. For someone, a lot of artists feel confused in the sense of, let's say, okay, I had this body of work. I am transitioning into a new style body. How do I communicate to my fans, followers, collectors, buyers, what's happening? Uh, and I think, what's complex in this situation is that A, sharing does not come natural to all of us. We all have different ways of sharing. B, a lot of times you're in points of confusion. You try to hold yourself back and you feel like, I think I, for one, feel like I want to go into a cocoon, understand what's happening. Once I figured it out, then I want to come out. Like, that's just the process I feel comfortable with personally. But a lot of artists I've seen that they share the messy and, all sides, and then whatever is happening, people are learning. So there are several formulas in the sense of like what's natural to each one of us. uh, did you have any strategy in the sense of communicating what you're thinking, why you're doing this, how your thought process and creative process is changing, and communicating that to your current followers and collectors?
I do think that's somewhat important. Um, some people read posts and want to know more. Some people are just purely visual, and they don't need me to clothe my art with words. But um, I think it's important to do some personal reflection and try to understand why you're going through what you're going through, or your ideas. And it's very difficult to put words to art. Um, we all know that it's an attempt. I mean, all we can do is attempt to help people understand. So um, I think it's a good thing for people to and change slowly. And you don't have to throw it out there on social media. You know, if you're not comfortable with it, then but you can always throw things out and even look at what other people have written about doing the same similar things, or what other people are doing, and try to understand, and maybe you can make a connection with their words that goes, aha, I'm doing the same thing, I didn't realize. Um, yeah, I think art is really hard to it's hard to explain, it's hard to understand, even for the artist. So
Yeah,
I
i
don't
i
know.
uh, second that.
Yeah, I think it's harder for the maker than it is for others. So,
Someone else, yes, I think that's true. I think when I look at someone's work, I'm like, oh, this is what I see, this is what I feel. But when I'm looking at my own work, I'm like, what am I feeling? There's so many feelings that it is harder to sieve through and see it from a very different standpoint, versus I feel like I'm immersed into it. And every direction I see so many things. And I'm like, what is this?
yeah, that's good though. That's a good question for you to ask yourself. But even if you don't understand, or you don't have an answer, that doesn't make it insignificant or unimportant. Just um, the process for me is the most important. That's my true love. Is I love every step of my process.
So coming to process, how about you take me through, how do you work? How do you create these beautiful, amazing works that I can see in the background right now? What does a typical process, like a day in the studio? How do you approach your paintings? How do you, uh, how does your mind work?
Okay, so typically I would paint a portrait first. So
Okay.
I would get the portrait done and they would sort of guide me or something. Like I would just get some sort of idea or inspiration from that portrait. No background, no nothing, just paint the portrait. And then
Just the
I
center of the portrait.
yeah, and then I just would get a direction. However, now that my materials are evolving, sometimes a material drives my
What kind of
idea.
portrait?
Yeah. So, um, part of my process is just going and treasure hunting and going to the antique stores and the secondhand stores and seeing what jumps out at me and like, oh, buy me. I don't know what I'm going to do with you, but it's yelling at me to buy it. And so that's fun. That's like a super fun part. I love getting the old jewelry and cutting it up into pieces, sorting it all by color. So I have drawers and drawers you can see behind me full of stuff, um, that's all organized. Um, and then I sort of decide, it takes me a long time, maybe a couple weeks to even lay something out and figure out how it's gonna go because it's really hard to undo. So, um, sometimes I have undone things, but it's really difficult. So now I just spend like maybe weeks sort of finalizing the plan, or at least get a good start. And then the materials talk to me, and I work stream of conscious too. So I'm not afraid to make a different change or a move. I always go with that's a yes. If it's a yes, I do it. If it's a no or a maybe, I don't do it. And then I go to the next step. So I paint first, I determine a background, um, I sew, and then I wait to adhere everything last.
So are you literally sewing every piece on the portrait?
Yeah, so I'm doing much of the sewing. I have a few pieces where I've gotten old quilts that that I've recycled, the crazy quilts. Actually, I had a lady send me the most beautiful squares from her great grandmother, and I'm so scared to mess them up that I've had them for a while, and I'm just still trying to figure out how to keep these intact, and it's embroidery I could never possibly do. They're amazing. So, I have to wait for that idea. I have to sit on things sometimes for a year or 2 before I know, "Speak to me."
Yeah, I love that. So what are you working on right now in the studio? Is there something that you're working on, a project, a new work, something that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'm working on a Little Red Riding Hood, and the reason why is because I got a coyote face, literally the face of a coyote, the skin with the ears and everything, and of course, I can find these odd things at my local flea market, um, but I'm kind of telling a different story, one that's not the typical where, kinda like I don't know if you ever read, Clarissa Pincola's book, Women Who Run with Wolves?
Yes, I love that
Okay,
book.
so it's kinda
Love
like
that book.
that sort of idea that maybe she killed the wolf and not the huntsman, and in one of the stories, one of the versions says that the wolf had swallowed her whole, and so it's sort of the wolf coming up, like she's coming out of it, and, so it's a little bit of a different tale, and then, I've got some old book, like an old Red Riding Hood book, um, that I've taken the pages out of and using those in the background, so it's a little different because now I'm using some paper in this piece, which it's taken me a little bit to figure out how to use paper, um, just because of dimensionality. So it's a new piece, I'm trying a new material.
I am very excited to see. And when it's done, make sure you share with us, and we'd love to support you. Any new projects that you'd like to share with us? Anyone who's listening, where we can support you? where people can find you. It's been amazing chatting with you. I want to make sure that, we give you enough space to share whatever you'd want.
I'm super excited to be doing the PMA Craft Show, which is the Philadelphia Museum of Art Fine Craft Show. That's coming up in the first weekend of November in downtown Philadelphia. So that's I've been trying to get into that show for a couple years, and I'm super
Wow.
excited to. Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. And then in December, I'll be at the Armadillo Christmas Bazaar, which is
Okay.
in Austin, Texas,
Okay.
and it's an indoor show for about a week and a half, 2 weekends and a full week.
And where can people find you on the internet, on social media, website?
CarriePierce.com, and my Instagram is one Carrie Pierce.
Perfect. So, what I'm going to do is everything, the books you've mentioned, the links you've mentioned, and your work, we list all of that in the show notes. So, anyone who's interested can go on our website and find the link of this podcast episode and find everything we've spoken about and read a lot more and view Carrie's work that we're very, very grateful to be sharing. Thank you so much, Carrie. It was so nice to talk to you, and I'm very grateful that we got this chance to be in your studio to hear what you do and to literally see that as well.
Well, thank you. This was delightful, and I think you're brilliant, and you're doing amazing work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. I hope you have a good day. Thank you for making it.
Thank you for having me.